Hello, and thanks for joining me for this flip video of the Crafter's Companion box kit number 14. This one's all about stencils, and this first portion of the video, I'll just be creating a bunch of different backgrounds with the stencils provided in the kit, and then I'll incorporate them into my cards. I'm going to try to make more backgrounds than I think I'll need. That way I'll have some options to choose from when I sit down to do my flat, layered, interactive, and pop-up cards. So in this first one, I'm using some Cosmic Shimmer polish. I think this one is an opal polish, so it looks really great on a black or a dark background. And this damask pattern is so pretty and so elegant, and the black and gold looks really, really good together. So I love how this panel turned out. And you definitely want to clean your stencils right after you use them. That way they don't stain. Sometimes when I'm stenciling, I'll have like a little bit of a bucket of soapy water and I'll just throw my stencils in there. I didn't prepare that for this session, so I'm taking the time to clean my stencils as I go. In this one, I'm stenciling onto some colored cardstock, and I'm going for kind of a tone-on-tone look. So I found that the distressed ink in Seedless Preserve works really well with this. And one nice thing that you can do with these is you can actually, when you clean your stamps, just use a baby wipe or a wet wipe and wipe your stencil clean on another clean panel, and you'll get a second panel. So with this one, I'm trying to do a little bit of shading, and so I'm going a little darker towards the center of the flowers and lighter towards the outer edges. And again, I'm kind of going just for not necessarily a tone-on-tone, but just more purple tones. So there's a cool tone purple and a warm tone purple on this panel. And I really like that you can get a little bit of that dimension by just inking a little bit more towards the center to build up that color and leaving it nice and light on the outer edges. This is another really useful stencil to have in this kit, and it's just random circles of various sizes, and it's really great for creating these bokeh effect backgrounds. And I'm not super experienced creating the bokeh effects. I think this is literally the second time I'm trying this technique. So every time I do it, I kind of, learn a little bit. And this is the first time I'm actually doing the bokeh effect onto solid color cardstock. I figured it's kind of nice to already start with that color and then use a darker shade ink to get those darker circles. So here I'm using Peacock Feathers in the distressed ink, and I'm trying to overlap all of the circles a little bit, and I'm trying to vary how much ink I'm putting down. So in some areas I'm leaving it just a little bit translucent, in some areas I'm going darker, and here I'm using my Hero Arts, I think this is the Unicorn Pigment White ink, and I'm going back over some of the earlier circles just to make it more bright white, because as the pigment ink dries, it'll soften a little bit, and so I wanted some areas to just have a little bit more look a little bit more solid, and some look a little bit more translucent. So so there's that panel. And then with this panel, because of this design, I thought it would look really cool to use some Crackle Mousse through it, and then you'll get even more crackles in between these patterns. And so with Crackle Mousse, I like using a thin application because you can really decide what kind of look you want, and a thicker layer of the Crackle Mousse will create larger, deeper cracks in your design as it dries. But I kind of like using a thinner application and getting more fine lines and smaller cracks. In the end, I didn't actually use this panel. but I love how it turned out. So I'm saving it, and I'll use it in on a future card, but it won't be featured in this set. So this is the start of my card making. This will be my flat card, and so I'm using that bokeh background that I created, and because it's flat, and for my own sort of rules for a flat card, I like to only limit myself to one additional layer on top of the card base, and so I've cut out of that panel this decorative square, and this is what I'll use for my sentiment. And I'm just using the back of my die cut so that I have a solid color panel that I just white heat embossed the sentiment over. And just to dress it up a little bit, I'm gonna use this super cute heart stamp. It's got those decorative swirls in it, so really love that. And what I'm gonna do is actually stamp it first in the same pigment ink, unicorn white ink that I used on my bokeh background. And then I'm going to stamp it a second time using, again, the same distress ink that I used on the background, but I'm offsetting a little bit. That way the white serves as a little bit of a highlight on that pattern. So that's just another way of getting a little bit of extra kind of interest and depth and dimension to your stamps. So you can really do that with anything. And originally the idea was to inlay that panel back in, but I wanted to see what it would look like leaving it white and then stamping the sentiment in the Peacock Feathers. And I kind of ended up liking that better. I figured if I didn't like it, I could always still inlay that piece back in, but I liked the bringing that white into the center of the card, and so in the end I didn't use the panel that I prepared. This is a super fast card, so this is my layered card where I just used my stenciled background and one of the sentiment die cut toppers that comes in the kit because it's already gold foiled and it's pre-cut and it looks great. So super easy and fast card. These stencils really do make for easy cards, and because they're so lovely and the patterns are so nice that they really can kind of be the focal point of your card. So here I'm using some of the really pretty solid color cardstock, and you get a lot of cardstock, and what's really nice is in each of the sort of color ways you get a dark, a medium, and a light, and so I've just die cut these ovals a couple times. So one in a darker shade, one in a lighter shade, and then one out of white where I stamped my sentiment. And I'm just doing some offsetting so that there's a shadow and there's a highlight to that oval. And it just makes it look a little bit more interesting. And if you remember, this is the panel, the extra panel that I got by cleaning my stencil onto a white panel. And you get this really soft effect that is a really nice subtle background and really pretty. You can still see the design, and it's just a lovely effect. So another really easy card to put together. This one was the original stenciled panel that I stenciled onto some solid color cardstock. And I happen to have a die that makes it really easy to create these kind of sliding window cards. And I don't know if that's what it's called. Maybe it's like it's almost like a sliding easel card because it has the score line where it does slide up and creates that easel. And it makes it really easy. There's just 2 dies in this set, and I don't recall where I got it, so unfortunately, I don't have a product link to share, but you don't necessarily even need dies to create this style of card. It just is really convenient because everything is sized, it has the little folds and score lines and everything already for you. And so here, I'm just adding a little bit of foam just so that there's that extra little bit of room so that that panel can slide up and down easily. And it's nice to kind of keep the foam sort of close to that panel that slides, but not so close that if there's any adhesive or stickiness on the sides of your foam that it might impede that sliding motion. And again, I use some of the one of the die cut toppers as my sentiment, and I only attached it to the bottom portion, that way it stands up when you pull up that card. And I don't know if you saw, but I just placed that sliding mechanism over my card base and traced out where the window is when you slide open the top panel, and that way I know where to line up my sentiment and stamping so that it sits nicely within the portion that's going to be visible. And I almost always forget that I have these Memento Dewdrop inks. I always go to my distress inks first, but these Memento Dewdrop inks are also really, really nice. I did end up going with the distress ink anyways, just for some color variation. And these butterfly stamps are really, really gorgeous. And initially, sometimes when you stamp, it does look a little bit uneven, but as it dries, it definitely evens out and looks nicer. And then another really pretty simple card, and I do have 2 panels of that stencil design. That way you kind of get a little bit of a surprise when you pull that panel up. This card is, I think they call it a Peekaboo card. I'm considering it my pop-up card because when you open the card, that's when you get that extra hidden kind of peekaboo surprise element. Although technically nothing actually pops up out of the card. And I did originally put this layer on wrong, and so I had to peel it up and do it again. But here's how you line up your panels so that everything is going to be, all those circle apertures line up really well. So all you do is just, you line it up, you put your die over your a previously die cut area, and then you'll know that you got that in the right place. And so this card requires a couple of different panels. So you've got your front panel, you've got this inner panel, which is going to be the inside of your card, and then you've got your back panel, and then you also have that hidden panel that's going to slide over and be that peekaboo aspect. So I wanted to dress up the front of this card a little bit, and so this particular card I'm kind of almost designing on the fly a little bit, but what I did was I just put some masking tape at the top of my stencil so that acts as a hinge, and I've used my grid mat to line up my card base. That way, initially I was thinking I would do some inking where it looks tone on tone from the outside of the card, but then within the circle I was going to ink up a more colorful version of the stencil. So I've got everything lined back up, and I'm contemplating how I'm going to ink this, whether I'm going to ink it directly onto the card or onto a die cut piece. So I just decided to put it on a die cut piece because I wasn't 100% sure where I was going with this and whether I would use it. So I just took a circle that was die cut out of that aperture, and here you can see I'm going with brighter colors. I'm introducing some green so that it's not tone on tone, and then I was starting to kind of second guess what I wanted to do here. So I also prepared another panel with just the sentiment, and so I'm going back and forth between opening and closing so that I can see what all it looks like. And so it kind of helps to have everything lined up and then you slide your panel in place. You could also just stamp directly on the card base itself. But since I was a little bit unsure of where I was going, I did all of my stamping on these additional little die cuts. And so instead of using that other inked panel, I just decided to add a different sentiment panel. And I'm going back in with my stencil and adding a little bit more design to that white border that the stencil didn't quite extend out to. So this way it looks a little bit more intentional, that everything is inked all the way to the edge of the card and not just on the colored cardstock. And again, I wanted to dress up this solid color panel as well. So I'm using this really cute, kind of sketchy heart stamp to actually create a flower. So, and just a little bit extra decorative element that mimics the pattern that I stamped around the sentiment in the circle. So there you have the Peekaboo card. So when you open it, that hidden panel slides over and you get that second sentiment. So a recap of all of my cards. This is my flat card with the bokeh design. And really super fun using these stencils. They really do make for quick cards. And this panel was just me cleaning my stencil from a previous background onto some white cardstock, and it gives you this really nice soft card and a second bonus panel. This layered card is super easy, just using some Cosmic Shimmer opal polish, and I provided foiled die cut topper sentiment, which I've also used on this card as well. And this is a little kind of slider easel card with two different stenciled backgrounds on it. So when you pull up this card, you could also put another sentiment on that panel as well. And you can see that was the original panel that I used for my second card. And so here is my pop-up card, which is just a little peekaboo. So you'll have one sentiment when it's closed, and when you open it, this secret panel slides over. So there are my cards using this really fun Crafter's Companion box kit. Thanks so much for joining me. I hope you enjoyed this video. If you did, please consider subscribing and hitting the notification bell so that you get a notification whenever I post a new video. Thanks so much. Happy crafting and have a fantastic day. Bye.